Hello everybody, back to another video. Today we are going to be reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It's not going to be the whole thing, it's just going to be the first chapter. So, guys, let's go in for this audio for this book. Okay, so let me set this up. Okay. Oh no, guys, is it okay if you see me upside down? Okay, so let me start. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Pleasant Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious. Because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time cleaning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley. In their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think that they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't even have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursley-ish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never even seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull gray Tuesday, our story starts. There was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley gossiped away happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large tawny owl fluttered past the window. At past 8, Mr. Dursley picked up his sorry guys. Oh wait. Oops. I forgot. There. And I forgot. There. Mrs. Dursley on the cheek and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed. Because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal at the wall. Little tyke, shouted Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar. A cat reading a map! For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to, "Can I go get the dog? Can I go get the dog?" Look again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner. Go! Look! Go open the door! On the corner of Privet Drive, there was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light, Mr. Dursley. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back as Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road. He watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No looking at the sign. Cat couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove towards town, he thought of nothing except a large order of jewels he was hoping to get that day. But on the edge of town, jewels were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be a lot of strangely dressed people about. People in cloaks. People in cloaks. Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes. The get-ups you saw on young people, he supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, and his eyes fell on 100 of these weirdos standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was arranged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why? That man had been older than he was, and wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him. But didn't struck Mr. Dursley that this was a problem, some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on. And a few minutes later, Mr. Dursley arrived in the grunting car park. His mind back on the drills. Mr. Dursley always sat with his back to the window in his office on the ninth floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drills. That morning, he didn't see the owl swooping past in broad daylight. Tough people down in the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl, even at nighttime. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal owl-free morning. He yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls, and he shouted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime. He thought he'd stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the baker's opposite. He'd forgotten all people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the bakers. He eyed them angrily as he passed. He didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. This lot were whispering excited too, as he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large donut in a bag. That he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters, that's right. That's what I heard. Yes, there's some here. Mr. Dursley spotted dead. Oh no, this is a lot. Fear slapped him. He looked back at the Sorry guys, I keep messing up. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whispering as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, snapped as he secretly not to disturb him, seized his telephone, and had almost finished dialing his home number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his mustache, thinking, no, he was being stupid. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. He should have been lots of people called Potter who had a son named Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He never even seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold. There was no point in worrying, Mrs. Dursley. Mrs. Dursley, she always got upset at any mention of her sister. She didn't name her. If he had a sister like that, but all the same, those people in cloaks. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on the drills that afternoon. And when he left the building at 5 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. Sorry, he grunted as the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. It was a few seconds before Mrs. Dursley realized that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He didn't seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face built into a wide smile, and he said in a squeaky voice that made passers-by stare, "Don't worry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy day." And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle and walked off. Mr. Dursley stood rooted to the top. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he had been called a muggle, whatever that was. He was rattled. He hurried to his car and set off home, hoping he was imagining things, which he had never hoped before, because he didn't approve of imagination. As he pulled into the driveway of number 4, the first thing he saw, and it didn't improve his mood was the tabby cat he spotted that morning. It was now sitting on his garden wall. He was sure it was the same one. It had the same markings around its eyes. "Shoo," said Mr. Dursley loudly. The cat didn't move. It just gave him a stern look. Was this normal cat behavior? Mr. Dursley wondered, trying to pull himself together. He let into the house. He was still determined not to mention anything to his wife. Mr. Dursley had a nice normal. Mrs. Dursley had a nice normal day. She told him over dinner all about Mrs. Next Door problems with her daughter, and how Dundee had on a new one. No, it isn't that. It's not. Mr. Darcy tried to act normally when Dundee had been put to bed. He went into the living room in time to catch the last report on the evening news. And finally, bird watchers everywhere have reported that the nation's owls have been behaving very unusual today. Although the owls normally hunt at night and are hardly ever seen in daylight, these have been hundreds of sightings of these birds, flying in every direction since sunrise. Experts are unable to explain why the owls have suddenly changed their sleeping pattern. The news reader allowed himself a grin, most mysteriously. And now over to Jim McGuffin with the weather. Going to be any more showers of owls tonight, Jim? Well, Ted, said the weatherman, I don't know about that, but it's not only the owls that have been acting oddly today. Viewers as far apart as Kent, Yorsley, and Dundee have been pawning and to tell me that instead of the rain I promised yesterday, they've had a downpour of shooting stars, perhaps. Perhaps people have been celebrating bonfire night early. It's not till next week, folks, but I can promise a wet night for tonight. Oh wait, forgot to show you the picture. Yeah, by the way, this is upside down, so I'm actually spinning this. So I actually am having to turn this upside down. Sorry about that red thing. It keeps getting in the way. Mr. Dursley sat floating in his armchair, shooting stars all over Britain, owls flying by daylight, mysterious people in clothes all over the place, and a whisper about the Potters. Mrs. Dursley came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. It was no good. He'd have to say something to her. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia? Dear, haven't you heard from your sister lately, have you? As he had expected, Mrs. Dursley looked shocked and angry. After all, they normally pretended she didn't have a sister. No, she said sharply. Why? Funny stuff on the news, Mr. Dursley mumbled. Owls, shooting stars. Knew a lot of funny-looking people in town today. So stop Mrs. Dursley. Well, I just thought maybe it was something to do with, a lot. Mrs. Dursley spilled her tea with put lips. Mr. Dursley wondered whether he had dared he heard the same Potter. He decided he didn't dare. Instead, he said, as casual as he could, their son, he'd be about Dudley's age now. Oh yes, said Mr. Dursley, his heart striking horribly. Yes, I quite agree. He didn't say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. When Mrs. Dursley was in the bathroom, Mr. Dursley crept into the bedroom window and pierced into the front garden. The cat was still there. It was standing there in perfect drive as it was waiting for someone. What was he imagining things? Could all this have anything to do with the Potters? If it did, if it got out that they were related to a pair, well, he didn't think it could be. Yeah. He didn't think it could bear. 2 hours swooped overhead, in fact. It was nearly midnight before the cat moved at all. A man appeared on the corner of the cat. He had been watching, appeared so suddenly and silently. You had thought he'd popped out of the ground. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man has ever seen before in perfect drive. He was a tall, thin, and very old, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were long enough to tuck into his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak, which swept the ground, and high-heeled buckled shoes. His blue eyes were light bright and sparkling behind half-moon speckles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize that he had just arrived in the street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak, looking for something, but he did seem to realize he was being watched, because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He had found what he was looking for in his inside pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open, held it up in the air, and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next one flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked to put outer, until the only lights left in the whole street were 2 tiny twinkles in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. If anyone looked out of their window now. Even bloody-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening on the pavement. Albus Dumbledore slipped the putt out of the back and his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses, exactly the shape of the markings the cat had around its eye. She too was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun. She looked definitely ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." You'd be stiff if you've been sitting on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? You could have been celebrating. Must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here." Wait, guys, sorry. This is gonna take about like 10 seconds. No, it's gonna take like 40 seconds. So guys, I gotta go clean my ears.
Where's some of her headphones? Because my headphones need to be charged, Mom, okay? How'd I connect them? Mom? It doesn't work. I'm trying to connect them. How? You mean a shower?
Sorry about that. Let me keep cleaning. Professor McGonagall sniffled angrily. Sorry, guys. Professor McGonagall sniffled angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating, all right," she said impatiently. "You think they'd be a bit more careful, but no, even the Muggles have noticed something joking on. It was on their news." She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room window. "I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars. But they're not completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. Oh, bet that one was Douglas Diggle. He never had much sense." "You can't blame them," said Dumbledore gently. "We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. "I know that," said Professor McGonagall. "It brought me, but that's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless on the streets in broad daylight." in broad daylight, not even dressed in muggle clothes, swamping gloomers. She flew a sharp sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he didn't. So she went on. A fine thing it would be if on the very day who seems to have disappeared at last. The Muggle found out about us all. I suppose he really has gone, Dumbledore. It certainly seems so, said Dumbledore. We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for sherbet lemon? A what? A sherbet lemon. The type of muggle sweet I rather fond. No, thank you, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for sherbet lemons. As I say, even if you know who has gone, my dear Professor, surely a sensible person like yourself, you can call him by his name. All this, you know who. Nonsense. For 11 years, I have been trying to persuade people to call this proper name, Voldemort, Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was unsticking 2 sherbet lemons, seemed not to notice. Seemed not to notice. It's getting so confusing. If we keep saying you know who, I've never seen any reason to be fighting or saying Voldemort's name. I know you haven't, said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exploded, half admiring, but you're different. Everyone knows, only you know who. Oh, all right, Voldemort was frightened of. You flatter me, said Dumbledore calmly. Voldemort had powers I would never have, only because you're too. Well, noble use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed so much since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, the owls, nothing the rumors are flying around. Sorry, my brother's crying. Like, very sorry. So, yeah. Nothing the rumors back to flying around. You know what everyone's saying? About why he's disappeared. About what finally stopped him. It seemed Professor McGonagall had reached the point she was most anxious to discuss. The real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard holiday for neither as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain that whatever everyone, wink wink, was saying, she was not going to believe it was Dumbledore. Believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another sherbet lemon and did not answer. What they're saying, she pressed on, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumor is that Lily and James Potter are that they're dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. I can't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as he went on. That's not all. They're saying if he tried to kill the Potter's son, Harry, but he couldn't kill that little boy. So no one knows why or how, but they're saying that when he couldn't kill Harry Potter, Voldemort's power somehow broke it. And that's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true? Flattered Professor McGonagall. After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astonishing of all the things to stop him. But how in the name of heaven did Harry survive? We can only guess, said Dumbledore. He may never know, Professor Professor McGonagall pulled out a lace, handed it, and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles, whatever that's called. Dumbledore gave great sniff as he pulled a golden watch from his pocket and exclaimed it. It was very odd. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have been sent to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's late, I suppose.